worked 38 years as a civil engineer, skipped every vacation I could, drove the same truck for 11 years, and saved enough to buy a small farm on the coast of Maine, 12 acres, a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a barn I planned to convert into a woodworking shop, and a view of the water that made my chest feel like it finally had room to breathe. I closed on it the second Tuesday of April. The same week I turned 63. My wife, Patricia, had passed 2 years before. She'd always wanted us to have land. I was finally keeping that promise, even if she couldn't be there to see it. I called my daughter that evening from the porch. The Atlantic was turning orange at the horizon, and the air smelled like salt and pine. She answered on the first ring. "Dad, are you there? Did you actually do it?" "Sitting on the porch right now," I said. "There's a heron standing in the marsh about 50 yards out like he owns the place." She laughed. It was the real kind, not the polite kind. Mom would have loved that. We talked for 20 minutes. Her teaching job, her garden, her son's baseball team, good things, safe things. Before we hung up, she said, "You earned this, Dad. 38 years. You earned every inch of it." I sat there until the heron left and the sky went dark. First quiet evening I'd had in years. The phone rang around 9. "Her parents are moving in with you." My son-in-law didn't say hello. His name is Dominic, and he has a habit of starting sentences like he's already halfway through an argument you haven't been told about yet. They lost their lease in Hartford. I already told them they could use the place while they find something. I didn't say anything for a moment. The marsh had gone completely still. "Dominic, I signed the papers this morning. It's temporary. A few months, maybe 4. They're good people. They'll stay out of your way. I bought this property to be alone. I've been planning this for 6 years. Then you should have planned for family." He said it the way you'd say obviously. Like I'd made a rookie mistake. "I'll text you their arrival date. Probably end of the month." He hung up. I held the phone and looked at the dark water. Somewhere out there the heron had found its evening spot. Smart bird. Knew exactly where it belonged. I went inside, found a legal pad in one of the moving boxes, and sat at the kitchen table. I didn't write anything emotional. I wrote questions. How long until they arrive? What are my legal options? What does a short-term rental in coastal Maine cost? What documentation do I have on my purchase, my intent, my plans? The moving boxes sat around me, half unpacked. I'd had the place for 11 hours. I didn't sleep. By 5 in the morning, I had 2 pages of notes and a plan forming. I'd spent 38 years solving structural problems. Foundation failures, load-bearing complications, drainage issues that looked simple on paper and were anything but. You learn to assess before you react. You learn that the people who act fastest usually fix the least. I loaded the truck and drove 20 minutes into town. The county records office opened at 8:30. I was there at 8:22. I asked for comparable rental listings for coastal properties in the area, printed the results, and had the clerk make me copies of my deed and closing documents. I also stopped at a hardware store and bought 2 trail cameras, the kind with motion sensors and cellular connectivity. The clerk told me they were popular with hunters and property owners wanting to watch for trespassers. I told him I was new to the area and wanted to keep an eye on wildlife near the marsh. He nodded, like that was the most normal thing he'd heard all week. I installed them that afternoon, one on the post at the end of my driveway, angled toward the approach. One mounted on the barn eave with a view of the front door and porch, both connected to my phone. I tested the motion capture, adjusted the angles, ran the signal check 3 times, the engineering habit, measure twice, then measure again. Then I drove back to my old house in western Massachusetts, the one I hadn't sold yet, and I waited. They arrived on a Thursday. I was at my kitchen table in Massachusetts with my laptop open when the first notification came through. A silver SUV moving slowly up my gravel driveway, stopping near the porch. 2 people got out. I recognized them from family events over the years, Dominic's mother, Renata, and his father, Hector. She stood with her hands on her hips, looking at the property the way someone appraises something they're considering buying. He walked the length of the porch and tried the front door, which was locked. The camera microphone picked up pieces of their conversation. Smaller than I pictured. That was Renata. Doesn't matter. It's free. Hector sat down in my rocking chair. My rocking chair. The one I'd driven to a furniture shop in Portsmouth, specifically to buy for that porch. He leaned back and looked at the water. Not bad. They walked the property for 40 minutes. Hector peered through the barn windows. Renata pulled out her phone and appeared to be taking photos. At one point, she said something I couldn't fully make out, but the word renovate was clear. I closed the laptop and sat back. Then I drove to my attorney's office. Her name is Beverly, and she's been practicing law in Western Massachusetts for 30 years. She has the kind of organized, unhurried manner that makes you feel like whatever problem you're bringing her has already been solved 3 times by someone else, and she just needs to help you see the path. I walked her through everything. The purchase, the call from Dominic, the arrival of his parents. I showed her the photos from my trail cameras on my phone. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. Your son-in-law gave your address to his parents without your consent, she said when I finished. They have no legal right to occupy your property. You can have them removed. I know, I said, but I want to do this carefully. There's my daughter to consider. Beverly nodded. How much does your daughter know about what's happened? She thinks her husband handled it appropriately. She called me last week to say she was glad I was being flexible. Beverly looked at me over her reading glasses. And you didn't correct her? Not yet. She leaned back. All right, then let's protect you first. Revocable living trust for the property. Designates you as trustee, keeps the asset out of reach of any potential claims. We also draft a formal letter to Dominic documenting your non-consent to his parents' occupancy and demanding they vacate within 30 days. Everything in writing, everything time-stamped. How soon? Letter goes out this week. Trust documents in 2 weeks. I wrote the check before I left. The letter arrived at Dominic's office on a Friday. He called me Saturday morning. What is this? His voice had that conference call flatness again, but underneath it something was pulling tight. A legal notice, I said. Your parents are occupying my property without permission. I'd like them to leave within 30 days. They have nowhere to go. That's not my problem to solve, Dominic. It is when they're family. I've heard that sentence my entire adult life, said by people who mean it and people who use it like a crowbar. My mother-in-law said it when she wanted us to lend money we'd never see again. My brother said it when he needed a cosigner on a loan his bank wouldn't touch. Every time it comes with the same implied ending, so you don't get to say no. They're not my family, I said. They're your family, which is why I'd expect you to house them. He hung up. That was a Sunday. By Wednesday, my cousin Raymond called from New Jersey. He and I hadn't spoken in 2 years. Hey, just checking in. Dominic reached out, said you've been having some trouble adjusting since Patricia passed, said you might be isolating. I sat with that for a moment. Patricia had been gone 2 years. I'd adjusted fine. I'd grieved, worked, planned, bought property, built a future. Isolating meant moving to a farm on the coast of Maine, which was exactly what I'd told everyone I intended to do for the last 6 years. I'm fine, Raymond. Thank you for calling. He said there was some kind of incident with the property. There was no incident. I sent a legal notice to someone occupying my land without permission. That's not an incident. That's a Tuesday. Raymond laughed a little uncomfortably. Okay, well, he seemed worried. I appreciate you checking. Give my love to the family. I hung up and wrote it down. Date, time, what was said. I'd started keeping a log 2 days after Beverly sent the letter. 38 years in construction engineering teaches you that the documentation you don't keep is the one that matters most when things go wrong. 3 more calls came that month. A former colleague. My brother-in-law in Ohio. My daughter's college roommate, who I hadn't spoken to since the wedding. All of them said roughly the same thing. Dominic was concerned. I seemed to be struggling. The farm was maybe too isolated. I was building the trust documents with Beverly, organizing my financial records, setting up the property with a proper security system, and sleeping 8 hours a night. None of that sounded like struggling to me. My daughter called on a Thursday evening. I was on the porch watching the marsh. Dad, Dominic says you sent his parents a legal notice. I did. That's so cold. They have nowhere to go. They have his son, I said. A son with a house. She went quiet for a moment. Our house isn't big enough. My house is 800 square feet. That's different. How? She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "You've changed since you moved up there. You're harder." I looked at the heron out in the marsh. He was back in his usual spot, standing still in the shallow water, patient as geology. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'd just stop pretending that everyone who says family means the same thing by it. She hung up without responding. I went inside and added the call to my log. The next morning, I drove into town and met Beverly. She had the trust documents ready for review, 41 pages. I read every one of them at the conference table while she answered emails. The critical provision was on page 14. My daughter inherited only if she was no longer married to Dominic, or if Dominic signed a legal waiver relinquishing any claim to my estate. Beverly had suggested it. I'd agreed without hesitation. I signed every page. 2 weeks later, my daughter called again. Her voice had a different quality this time. Not angry. Tired, and something under it I couldn't quite read. "Dominic mentioned you set up some kind of trust." I set down my coffee. "I did some estate planning. It's the responsible thing in my age." "He's upset about it. He said it's like you're cutting the family out." "It's my estate. I decide how it's structured." "Why would he even care unless—" She stopped herself. "That's a very good question," I said. "Why would he care?" She didn't answer, but she didn't hang up either, which felt like something. Dominic showed up at my property on a Tuesday without calling. I heard the truck coming up the gravel before I saw it. I set down the splitting maul, picked up my phone, started recording. I walked to the top of the porch steps and waited. He got out moving fast. His face was red. "You're not getting away with this," he said. "That trust is designed to punish my wife." "Your own daughter." "The trust protects my assets and ensures my daughter inherits appropriately." I kept my voice even. "It's standard estate planning." Appropriately. He practically spit the word, meaning only if she leaves me. "Is that what you want? You want her to leave me?" "I want my property protected from third-party claims, that's all." "Third parties. I'm her husband." "You're her husband. You have no legal claim to my property. The trust simply makes that clear in writing." He pointed at me. "I'll contest it. I'll get my own attorney and tear this apart. And when I'm done, you won't see her again. I'll make sure of it." I looked at him for a moment. He was a man who just threatened to use my daughter as a weapon. "Leave my property," I said. "Now, or I call the sheriff." He left. Tires spraying gravel, engine loud going down the driveway. I reviewed the footage right there on the porch. Clear. His face, his voice, every word. I uploaded it to cloud storage and emailed a copy to Beverly with the subject line, "Hostile confrontation, recorded. Tuesday." Her response came within the hour. "Good documentation. Get a medical evaluation scheduled. They'll try APS next." I called my doctor's office the next morning. "I'm 63, I own property, and I want comprehensive documentation of my physical and cognitive health," I told the receptionist. "Baseline evaluation, written report, something that can stand up if it needs to." She paused. "That's an unusual request." "I know. I'd like it anyway." The appointment was the following Monday. Dr. Hargrove was thorough. Blood work, reflexes, cognitive testing. He asked me to name the current president, count backward from 100 by sevens, recall 3 words after a 10-minute delay. I did all of it without difficulty. He wrote me a letter on clinic letterhead. Patient is alert, oriented, cognitively intact. No evidence of diminished capacity or dementia. Fully capable of managing personal affairs and financial decisions. I filed it in a folder labeled simply, Evidence. The Adult Protective Services visit came on a Wednesday morning. A woman named Constance, calm and professional, with a county lanyard and a clipboard. She said there'd been a complaint filed about my welfare. I told her immediately that I was involved in a property dispute with family members and suspected the complaint was related to that. She said she'd conduct her assessment objectively. I showed her the house, clean, organized, well-stocked, bills current, filing system in order. Medical evaluation from 11 days prior still in the folder. She read Dr. Hargrove's letter carefully. She walked through every room, She asked whether I had difficulty with daily tasks, whether I'd experienced confusion or memory problems, whether I felt safe. I answered each question directly and let her do her job. Before she left, she said quietly, "This is the most prepared individual I've encountered in a complaint response. Most people don't have documentation this current." 38 years in engineering, I said. "You plan for failure before it happens." She nodded. 2 weeks later, I received official written notice, case closed, complaint unfounded, no further action required. Beverly obtained a copy of the original complaint through legal channels. Dominic and Hector had filed it jointly. The allegations were specific and entirely fabricated. I had threatened family members. I was exhibiting paranoid behavior, evidence being the security cameras. I was refusing medical care. I was making erratic financial decisions. Each one had a clean rebuttal in my folder. I had never threatened anyone. The cameras were standard property security. I had completed a comprehensive medical evaluation 12 days before their complaint was filed. The trust was sophisticated estate planning confirmed by a licensed attorney. I read the complaint 3 times and then filed it under false allegations, documented. Then Beverly called. "I found something. Your son-in-law has missed 4 mortgage payments on the house he shares with your daughter. The bank filed a notice of default 6 weeks ago." I sat down. "He's in foreclosure?" "Early stages. But yes. And there's more. 18 months ago, he took out a home equity line of credit against the property. $40,000, single signature authorization. Your daughter's name is not on it." I thought about the calls, the pressure, the scheme to put his parents in my house, the attempt to get my property folded into a family trust, 4 missed mortgage payments, $40,000 borrowed against his wife's home without her knowledge. He wasn't just greedy, he was drowning. "Beverly," I said, "can I purchase that defaulted debt?" She was quiet for a moment. "It's unconventional." "But yes, banks sell delinquent loans to third parties. You could acquire it through an LLC, anonymously." He'd know the debt was sold, but not to whom. Would that give me leverage to protect my daughter's home? It would give you complete control over whether or not she loses it. I walked the property that evening, out to the edge of the marsh where the grass went soft under my feet. The water was high, the air cold for May. If I bought the debt, I'd hold Dominic's future in my hands. That was more power than I'd ever wanted over anyone. But if the bank foreclosed, my daughter would lose her home. And she still didn't know any of it was happening. The next morning, I called Beverly. "Do it. But my daughter doesn't know yet. Not until I can sit with her and explain everything." The transaction took 9 days. $34,000 to an intermediary firm that created a limited liability company called Coastal Bridge Holdings. Dominic received notice that his loan had been sold. No further information about the buyer. I filed the transfer receipt under leverage. My daughter came to the farm on a Saturday in late June. I made chicken salad sandwiches because it was what her mother used to make when things were difficult. She arrived looking tired in the way people look tired when they've been worried for weeks, but haven't admitted it to themselves yet. We sat on the porch for a while. She asked about the heron, whether I'd seen him. I said he was here every morning. Finally, she looked at the folder on the table between us. "Is that for me?" "Yes." I started with the mortgage, showed her the notice of default. Her hands went still on the pages as she read. "This says our loan was sold to something called Coastal Bridge Holdings." "That's me," I said. "I bought your debt." She looked up at me. How did you even?" "Because the bank was about to foreclose, and because I needed to understand exactly what was happening to you before I told you about it." Then I showed her the HELOC documents. $40,000, Dominic's signature, her name absent. She went through them slowly. Her hands started to shake. "He borrowed against our house and didn't tell me." "Yes." "Where did the money go?" "Best I can determine, most of it went toward his father's debts. Hector lost significant money in bad investment decisions over the past 2 years. That's why they lost their lease. That's why Dominic needed your house to absorb his parents. That's why, when that failed, he needed my property instead." She put the papers down. "How long have you known this?" "Pieces of it since April. The full picture since May." She looked at me the way people look when they realize a conversation they've been having for months was actually about something else entirely. Months. You've known for months that my marriage is built on. She stopped. I needed evidence before I showed you anything. If I'd come to you with suspicions in April, what would you have done? Her voice dropped. I would have believed him over you. I know. We ate the sandwiches without saying much. I poured more coffee. Then I walked her through the rest. The recording of Dominic at my porch, pointing at me, threatening to take my daughter away. The APS complaint, both his name and his father's on the signature line. The false allegations typed out in official county language. When I showed her the APS complaint, she started crying. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and long held. I let her. When she could speak, she said, "He tried to have you declared incompetent. His own father-in-law." "He did. To get your property." "Yes." She wiped her face. "What do I do?" "That's entirely your decision. But you should know the timeline. The federal mail fraud investigation into Hector and Renata is moving forward. Beverly expects warrants within a few weeks. When that happens, Dominic will be questioned. Your finances will become part of the public record." "Mail fraud?" I explained it. Hector and Renata had been using my farm's address on benefit applications and a new bank account. The property records showed it clearly. The camera footage confirmed they had visited once for less than an hour and never returned. Beverly had submitted the evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Portland 2 weeks prior. My daughter sat with all of it for a long time. "If I file for divorce," she finally said, "what happens to the house?" "If you file, I forgive the entire debt on the mortgage. You keep the house free and clear. I'll help you refinance into your name alone. You have a good salary and good credit. You can do it." She looked at me carefully. "You've been building this for 2 months." "I have. To protect me. And to make sure that when I showed you the truth, you couldn't be talked out of it." She left with a copy of every document in the folder. She didn't tell me what she'd decided. She just hugged me for a long time on the porch and drove away. 5 days later, Beverly called at 7 in the morning. "Warrants are being executed today. Thought you should know." I sat on the porch with my coffee and waited. An hour later, my daughter called. "Dad, Dominic just got a call. His parents were arrested." I reported crimes that were committed using my property, I said. "The justice system is doing its job." Long silence. Then, "I filed the divorce papers yesterday." I closed my eyes. "I'll need somewhere to stay while everything settles. I can't be in that house." "Come here," I said. "The guest room is ready. It's been ready." Dominic called an hour after that. Screaming, I let him finish. "Your parents used my property address for federal fraud," I said. "I reported it. That's what citizens are supposed to do. You destroyed my family." "You did that. I just documented it." Beverly joined the call when he threatened legal action. She was precise and final. He hung up. The following Friday, Dominic tried to list the house. The title search stopped him immediately. The lender on record was Coastal Bridge Holdings, and no sale could proceed without lien holder approval. He called Beverly in a panic. Beverly's response was calm. "My client is willing to discuss terms. Formal offer within 24 hours. The certified letter arrived Saturday morning. The terms were simple. I would forgive the full outstanding mortgage balance, $34,000, plus 7 months of arrears. Total debt forgiveness of approximately $41,000. In exchange, Dominic would sign a divorce agreement making no asset claims. He would sign a legal waiver relinquishing all rights to my estate, present and future. He would sign a sworn statement acknowledging he had no authority over my property at any time. 72 hours to respond. Refusal meant immediate foreclosure proceedings. He called my daughter. She told him she'd already filed. She told him to sign. Monday morning, he appeared at Beverly's office. She described him afterward without editorializing. Unshaven, quiet, smaller than his paperwork. He signed everything. When it was done, he asked whether he could keep the house. Beverly told him the house would be deeded to my daughter free and clear upon finalization of the divorce. He would need to find other housing. He left without a word. My daughter moved into the guest room at the farm for 6 weeks while the divorce processed. We built a routine. Morning coffee on the porch, her grading papers at the kitchen table while I worked in the barn, evenings cooking together. Simple things. I'd forgotten how much I missed having someone in the house. Some days she was okay, some days she wasn't. I didn't try to rush either. During one of the quiet evenings, she asked, "Did you ever doubt yourself? All those months of building the case, being patient, not telling me. Did you ever think you might be wrong about him?" I thought about that honestly. "No," I said, but I doubted myself about waiting. Every week, I didn't tell you I wondered if I was protecting you or just protecting the case. You were protecting both. Maybe. That doesn't always feel like enough. She was quiet for a while. Mom would have handled it completely differently. Your mother would have told him off at the first phone call and dared him to try anything. She laughed. The real kind again. Hector and Renata took a plea deal in federal court in August. 2 years supervised probation. $62,000 in combined fines and restitution. Permanent disqualification from federal benefit programs. The judge was measured and clear. They had exploited assistance programs intended for people in genuine need. I attended the sentencing. I didn't have to. Beverly said my presence wasn't required. But 38 years in construction taught me that when you build something, you stay until the last inspection is signed. Hector caught my eye crossing the courthouse lobby afterward. He looked away first. My daughter found a house to rent in a town 12 miles from the farm. Close enough to have Sunday dinners. Far enough that we both had our own lives. I helped her move in on a Saturday in early September. We painted the kitchen together, a pale yellow she picked out herself, and assembled furniture on the living room floor with tools from my barn. Small work. Ordinary work. The most important kind. The heron was in his spot when I got home that evening. He's there most evenings now. I've started thinking of him as a neighbor. I sat in the rocking chair and called my daughter just to say goodnight. She answered on the first ring. "How are you doing?" I asked. Honestly, better than I expected. "Good. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me when I wasn't on your side." I looked out at the marsh, the water going silver in the last light. "You were always on your side," I said. "You just didn't have all the information yet." She laughed softly. "I love you." "I love you too, honey." I stayed on the porch until the stars came out. The property was quiet. The water was still. Somewhere in the grass along the bank, the heron had settled in for the night. I'd bought this place to be alone with the silence I'd earned. What I hadn't planned on was earning something better. There's a moment I keep coming back to. It's not the morning the Warrens were executed, or the afternoon Dominic signed the papers with shaking hands. It's earlier than that. It's the night I sat at the kitchen table in Massachusetts with an empty legal pad and a phone I'd just put down. The farm I'd bought that same morning, already under threat, and I made a choice not to react. Just to think. Just to plan. I don't think that choice came from nowhere. It came from 38 years of learning that the first solution you reach for is almost never the right one. In engineering, you're taught that. A crack in a foundation looks like a crack. It's almost never just a crack. You don't patch the surface and walk away. You find where the load shifted, why it shifted, what's been compensating quietly for longer than anyone noticed. You document, you trace, you solve the actual problem. Dominic counted on me to react. He counted on anger, on a confrontation he could describe to family members in his own terms, on grievance that would make me look unstable and him look reasonable. Every move he made, the smear campaign through relatives, the APS complaint, the false allegations, was designed to find a man whose emotions had gotten ahead of his judgment. He never found one. Not because I wasn't angry. I was. But anger is information, not a plan. What I've come to understand is that doing the right thing and doing the smart thing aren't as separate as people pretend. Beverly told me I was the most prepared client she'd encountered in a complaint response. Dr. Tuzis, Hargrove told me my evaluation was unusually thorough for someone with no prior concerns. The APS investigator said most people in my situation didn't have documentation that current. None of that was luck. It was a decision, made at that kitchen table on a Tuesday night, to meet every attack with something harder to argue with than feelings, facts. My daughter asked me once whether I'd ever doubted myself during those months. I told her the truth. I doubted the waiting, not the work. Every week, I didn't tell her what I knew. I wondered if I was being patient or just being cowardly, but I knew that showing her a suspicion would only push her toward the person she trusted, and that the only thing strong enough to break through years of loyalty was evidence she couldn't explain away. So I kept building, and I kept quiet, and I kept showing up for her in the small ways that don't look like anything until they suddenly mean everything. It is a version of the story where I called Dominic back that first night and told him exactly what I thought of him. It would have felt good for about 40 seconds. Then I would have spent the next 6 months on the losing end of a narrative he controlled, with no documentation, no attorney, no trust, no leverage, and a daughter who'd chosen her husband's version of events over mine. Instead, I have a farm on the coast of Maine that no one can touch. I have a daughter who lives 12 miles away and answers the phone on the first ring. I have a legal record that says, in plain official language, that I am competent, clear-headed, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. None of it came from luck or from righteous anger or from someone riding in to fix it. It came from deciding, on a night when I had every reason to fall apart, to stay steady instead, to think first, to build something that lasts. The heron is in his spot every morning. The marsh is quiet. And I've learned that peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect carefully, one documented decision at a time.